Hi, everyone. Thank you for tuning in to today's webinar. I'm Haley Panagakis here on behalf of BizBash, and I am so thrilled to introduce today's presenters, Mike Dietrich and Alyssa Peltier of Cvent. Mike is the Vice President of Product Marketing at Cvent, responsible for marketing Cvent's Event Cloud portfolio. Has more than 20 years of industry experience, includes deep product marketing and management experience at the nation's largest event technology, education technology, broadcast media, and telecommunications companies. In his current role, Mike is responsible for defining and executing go-to-market strategies to drive new user acquisition, installed-based revenue growth, and customer retention. Now on to Alyssa. Alyssa is a highly skilled marketing professional with more than 10 years of experience. As a senior event marketing manager, she currently specializes in event experiential design and leads the global event marketing function for Cvent. Together with her team, she successfully manages more than 40 top-tier events annually. Alyssa's focus is on the creation of unique experiences and establishing quantifiable and integrated metrics for offline events to drive ROI from this marketing channel. So today, Mike and Alyssa will share strategies on structuring your 2021 events program. But before we get started, I just want to share a few housekeeping notes. Number one, be sure to share your webinar feedback with us using the hashtag #SmarterEvents and tag BizBash and Cvent so we can see it. We will also be hosting a Q&A at the end of this session, so please submit your questions via the Q&A button in your toolbar so make sure we see it. And lastly, at the conclusion of this webinar, we'll be sending out a copy of the recording so you can check back on everything that we've discussed today through that recording. All right, well, without further ado, I'd like to introduce Mike and Alyssa. You guys take it away.
Great.
Thanks, Haley.
Thanks, Haley. And thank you to all of you that are joining from probably everywhere since we're all home. For me, I live right outside of Washington, D.C. So joining you from right outside of Washington, D.C. Sunny, beautiful day here today. Alyssa, what's it doing down in your neck of the woods?
Yep, I am coming to you live from Austin, Texas. My scarf here is a little bit of wishful thinking, hoping that it'll be fall at some point here, but we're 75 and sunny today as well, and it's looking to be up towards 85. So we're still very much in summer mode here.
Well, thanks, Alyssa. And again, thank you all for joining us today. Appreciate you giving us an hour of your day. So let's go ahead and kick it off about kind of what Alyssa and I are going to take you through today. So I think it's probably safe to say that no program was more disrupted no organizational program was more disrupted in 2020 than your events channel. I mean, you really look at the fact that overnight, the entire events programs of most organizations, if not all organizations, disappeared entirely. And as a result, marketing departments really had to reimagine that entire engagement channel, and they had to rebuild that channel from scratch because they had to replace the lost leads that came from that channel, the pipeline and the revenue they generated. And so it was really a tremendous task. And throughout all of that, there was and still is tremendous experimentation that we all went through, whether you're a planner, whether you're a marketer. We really kind of made it up as we went through most of 2020. And look, from our perspective, that experimentation is to be applauded. We are all much smarter than we were when we went into 2020 when it comes to how we might have to restructure our event program. But I think as we exit the year, there are a lot of residual questions about where we go from here. What does 2021 look like? What does 2021 and beyond look like? And so today, what Alyssa and I want to walk you through is we want to take a look back at 2020 very quickly for some lessons learned. But we're going to spend most of the time looking ahead at what we think all of these changes collectively mean for your event programs that you'll all run. And just a quick hint, we see tremendous opportunity in the space going forward. And then we want to share our thoughts on some key strategies and practical takeaways that hopefully you and your organizations can apply to really take advantage of that opportunity in 2021. So that's how the next hour or so is going to look. And let's start then with just a quick look back in the rearview mirror. I think 2020 is a year that all of us will look forward to putting in the rearview mirror, but it really did have some important lessons for all of us to learn. And so let's kind of get in the Wayback Machine and go back into like February, maybe March of 2020. And we look back and it was, look, the scale and the scope of the takedown of the live event programs that we all had happened immediately, it happened completely, and it happened almost overnight. I mean, I'm a marketer by trade, and it literally would be like somebody coming to me and saying, hey, Mike, the internet is going to be down for the next year. How are you going to handle your inbound lead flow? Right? And just how you start to get your arms around that problem, how you think about what that total shutdown looks, and you still got to run your organization, you still got to run your business. And so when you look back, I think collectively we all kind of responded, oh God, we're going to have to take our in-person events and make them virtual. And so we started experimenting there. But I think many of us quickly learned that that copy and paste methodology probably wasn't going to be successful. We realized it wasn't going to be a one-off. We had to plan programmatically. We had to execute programmatically across our event program. And for the experience, we needed something much more branded. We needed something much more immersive, something much more interactive than maybe our traditional webinars were. So we started feeling our way through this problem. And through necessity, a lot of the technology out there started to catch up with what planners and marketers were demanding out of this new engagement space. And I think hopefully what many of you on the webinar today, you started to build that virtual skill set a little bit, started to build that execution muscle, and you started to see the benefits. We at Cvent saw about 6 to 10 times the number of registrations for a virtual event than we would for its counterpart in-person event. We had one event at Cvent that our typical 4,000 person user conference, we drove 43,000 registrations to that when we put it online. Look, made us feel great as marketers. We felt like we were the greatest marketers in the world. It's just a trend that we were seeing in the market. But look, as we start to depart 2020, I think many of us have some lingering questions about that virtual channel. Great for engagement, but will those users convert? Will they end up buying anything? Is there a business model around virtual? What if you have exhibitors and sponsors? Feels like we're still working through that part of the problem. And so as we sunset 2020, I think a lot of us really look forward to the return of face-to-face meetings. That it remains our highest engagement channel. It remains one of our highest converting channels. And so it's great to see data that I was looking at just yesterday, that 72% of planners currently have events booked and contracted. Live events, in-person events, booked or contracted in 2020 or 2021. So I think a lot of us are looking forward to seeing how these two new channels and two new event types really start to work together in 2020. So with that as kind of a quick look in the rearview mirror, I think what most of you are here for is, well, great, but what does the future look like? What do we think is ahead? And so for that part of the presentation, let me hand it over to Alyssa.
Thanks, Mike. You know, I think with all of that being said, our ability to literally predict anything that we endured over the last year would have been transparently shy of a miracle. So with that in mind, for today's presentation, we're going to leverage a little bit more of a reliable source or a different method for making some of our predictions about the future and what events are going to look like as we move into 2021. And that is going to come in the form of a tarot card. So we're going to do, a good old-fashioned tarot card reading today. And so with that, let's jump right into it and get into our first prediction here. And what does the first card have to tell us? And I don't think this one's going to be a mystery to anyone, but it's that virtual and hybrid events are here to stay. And, not being a mystery, that's not something new to the tarot card world, that sometimes those tarot cards are meant to tell us something that we already know or confirm what we already predict, right? But yes, definitively virtual will remain a priority for almost all of the organizations that we're talking to moving into 2021. with, like Mike alluded to already, many organizations reaching those record-breaking attendance numbers. You know, he said the 4,000 to 43,000, you know, it was 10x our in-person registrations at our virtual conference this year. And I'll add some color to that. It came with relative ease and it was at a lower cost. And so with that, I think we can confidently say that virtual is gonna remain in the cards for 2021. But what we will start to see as we move forward into this 2021, we are predicting some more frequency and creativity in terms of hybrid event offerings. With in-person events starting to come back into the fold, I think we are a little bit all kind of anxiously awaiting or seeing what these vaccine trials are going to deliver for us. But there is appetite certainly for us to start to explore and pilot and be creative with these new hybrid event offerings that can satisfy both the organization and the attendee needs. That's a theme you guys are going to hear a lot today: organization and attendee needs. A couple of factors we are still seeing, though, that are going to impact these types of predictions are residual safety concerns that come primarily in the form of reduced travel budgets. Many organizations took a hit in 2020 that will have an impact on our planning for 2021. And of course, travel restrictions that are still in play, both globally and also within organizations as well. And so to offer these hybrid event experiences is going to allow us that flexibility and accommodation amongst our attendees, and allowing us to kind of work and flex within those restrictions that we do have, but at the same time, allow for that scalability that the virtual offering does provide. So we definitely see those staying into the mix moving into next year. We're going to get into that in a little bit more detail, but let's move on to our second prediction here. Flip that card. The planner and the marketer silos start to fall. And as such, from my perspective, resources, technologies, and a lot of the program division or event program design and division that we've seen in existence for years, you know, just given the conversations that we have with both planners and marketers, giving our position in as a technology provider to both of those, we're going to start to see those break down in 2021. In 2020, we saw a lot more collaboration between these two parties coming to the table to discuss their technology needs, but of course, their overall program and event needs at large. That is dissimilar to what we had seen 2019 and prior, that traditional in-person events had really been executed, managed, and maintained, strategized. Key players was really within the planning organization, meetings and events, global events, whatever your nomenclature is. But with the virtual events, pushing the new boundaries and marketers being more involved than ever before, the cards predict that even when we transition back into the hybrid event model, both the traditional marketing and the digital skill set that they come to the table with are going to remain a staple of our event strategy and execution across what Mike and I refer to as the total event program, from as small and simplistic as your webinar up to a multi-day, multi-program, multi-objective conference. All right, last prediction here. Let's get all the cards out on the table. And lastly, we see that our event tech and our event data will start to mature. And I don't think this one's a mystery, given that planners and marketers are going to be more closely aligned, much more collaborative in their approach. The skill sets that they bring to the table are going to naturally allow for the technologies within the meetings and event space to mature and accelerate at a rapid rate. We do see, again, with those individuals coming to the table, that the event tech is more closely aligned and becoming rapidly integrated with the marketing tech stack, whatever MarTech you may use at your organization, whether that be Marcato, Pardot, Eloqua. Those types of conversations are starting to come into our realm as Cvent a little bit more than we have seen previously, just by nature of marketers being at the table. And so that technology really sets you up to have more control of that universal program architecture, what we're calling that total events program, and allowing you to essentially template across all of your events a better technology system. And we're starting to see that come to light with tighter integrations with CRM systems, marketing automation, and solving for some of the traceability issues that we had seen with in-person events. Obviously, with marketers being involved in those conversations now, we think that there's going to be more sophistication with the tech that's supporting the events as well. So with that, I will pass the torch back over to Mike. He's going to talk a little bit more about how we will take some of these predictions and turn them into action.
Great, thanks, Alyssa. Yeah, so let's get right to it, because there's a lot going on. So Alyssa just painted a picture of a 2021 and go forward event landscape. It's going to be like driven by, okay, we got virtual in the mix, we got hybrid in the mix, we got in-person in the mix. Planners and marketers are working together, and maybe haven't before, and there's a bunch of technology implications there. So that's what we want to spend the rest of the time talking about, because many of you on the line today, you're going to be the owner of or a key stakeholder in that new live engagement channel, right? You're going to be looking across all of these event types and being expected to organize them, execute them, and drive value from them, right? And in our mind, there's little doubt that that's going to be one of the highest impact channels next year that any of your organizations are going to have. So we want to talk very bluntly about what it's going to take to be successful in that new landscape. And so we're going to go through three things here. First, we're going to talk about strategy, right? When you have multiple event options, when you have multiple tools to use, how do you decide which event type to apply to which event? Given the objective here, should this be virtual? Should this be hybrid? Should this be in-person only? With all these event types at your fingertips, how do you decide what to apply where in your mix? Then we want to talk about team, right? Because as we look forward, certainly virtual and hybrid, as Alyssa said, these are events, but they have strong digital components. They start to look a lot like a digital channel. So the execution there may require a new blend of marketing and planning skill sets that we either may have or certainly need to build for many of us. So we're going to talk about that for a little bit. And then we're going to end by talking about the implications on the technology that needs to go and drive these programs, right? Having one piece of technology that drives your virtual events and another that drives your in-person events is probably just not going to be tenable, or it certainly is going to greatly drive your cost structure and the complexity of your organization through the roof. Because increasingly we see that as these three event types exist in the marketing mix, customers, buyers are going to transit through all three. You're going to see them in one, you're going to see them in many. And so looking at how the technology can listen for these interesting points, capture them collectively, and use them to drive value for your organization. So those are the three areas that we're going to spend a little time today. But before we do, wanted to just give you a quick sense of, look, hopefully this illustrates my point. One of the things that Alyssa said, which I think is super important takeaway for today, is if you're a planner, you're going to probably be asked to get a little bit more towards the marketing side next year. And if you're a marketer, you're probably going to be asked to be pushed a little bit more towards the planning side next year. Because again, these channels are coming together. So let me take you inside the marketing locker room for just a minute and talk about maybe what's changed and what hasn't changed as we look at this new landscape. So what's not changed, right? That all of your events and that event channel, look, it's already been a part of the buyer and customer journeys that many of us have. If you're on the corporate side, you probably reflexively understand this slide. It's the events are a key part of bringing buyers to close, and then after purchase, extending that lifetime value. If you're an association or a nonprofit, these events are the culmination, often the culmination of being able to bring new people into the organization. And so the fact that these events are going to play a role in 2021 and beyond, it's not changed, no surprise. But what has changed is that in 2021, you're going to have more tools in the toolkit. Virtual, hybrid, and in-person are going to live throughout these waves that you're seeing. And you're increasingly going to see the customers and buyers and prospects in all three. And so the opportunity in front of us then that we see is, and look, here's the business case for this. The opportunity, if we get this right across your total event program, is perhaps you can start to leverage the low cost and reach of your virtual events to bring more people into the top of the funnel, to engage more people that you hadn't previously engaged, to turn those audiences from unknown to known. Because again, the reach and the cost structure of virtual may be good for that. It may fit into your organization very well. And you might get more buyer insights and more lead flow because you started to build those profiles out as you were able to engage those new audiences. But the real opportunity here is capturing all of the thousands, or in some cases, millions of engagement points that live across all your events, that will live across all 3 of those event types as you go through the year next year. And then combining all of those data points with what you already know about your members or your buyers or your prospects. And so you can see them more clearly and act on that full picture of interest. So that's the opportunity we see ahead of us in this space more than ever, but certainly easier said than done, right? That is not a small problem, but we think it starts with the strategy component. So Alyssa, let me hand it over to you to walk everybody through how they might start to think about deploying these different event types.
Of course, the media slide of them all. We're going to spend a little bit of time here. So as you start to look at your event program going into 2021, I think a lot of us are kind of sitting there a little bit like, how do we even decide what we're going to do next year? You know, what type of event format or what even the specific programming element should remain virtual and which could be offered even in a hybrid format. And this really requires a thoughtful evaluation of the event and its corresponding programs, the purpose or the goals or the outcomes that we set out to do. And now is really the time to start doing that. I think many of us are in our budgeting cycle as we think about where are we going to invest our dollars to maximize our opportunities in 2021. And so it really starts with this conversation around strategy and how do we do one thing with the same outcome or intended purpose when we have all these restrictions. And so where do you start? How do you start that conversation? I like to acknowledge the fact, especially in the B2B space, that each one of your events should exist for a reason. You know, we don't simply gather just to gather. Even if we think that's what we're doing, there is always an intended outcome for the purpose of that event experience. I love to use this example. I know weddings can be a touchy subject when we're talking to a group of event and meetings planners, because I never want to devalue us as just simply a wedding planner. But I have a sister-in-law who had a bridal shower that had to be canceled due to the pandemic. And I had phone calls coming in from my mother and her mother saying, we don't know what to do. We don't know if we should do a virtual event or what's the purpose of this? Like, what's even the point? And the point of the bridal shower was to show the bride love and to, you know, value her and show our appreciation for her as a human and to celebrate her and shower her with love. So our objective in creating this different experience, albeit not in person, was to achieve that same outcome. So as you go through a strategic planning exercise, what you need to do is almost work backwards. What do we need to get out of this thing? And then how do we build the experience to achieve that? And does a hybrid experience do that? Does a virtual experience do that? Or can we only achieve that in an in-person space? So that's the type of conversation that needs to come to light, that needs to come to fold as you start to destruct to reconstruct what your 2021 program is going to look like. So I stress this, the importance of each of your events need to exist for a reason, because that reason is going to drive your decision-making process as you go into planning what that experience needs to look like from end to end. And we do this for events that we attend as well. Trade show investment or field marketing investment also comes with a similar set of strategic thinking that we need to put into practice and into play. And so clarifying each of those events that we not only host, but those that we attend also is, you know, fundamental to building that total event strategy that we're looking to wrap our arms around. So that's what we need to do. Start by stripping down each of your events to the essentials. Ask yourself, what were the goals? What were the intended outcomes of the event? I've given you some suggestions just to kind of grease the wheels and get you started in these types of conversations, but certainly there may be different objectives that you're trying to achieve within your own organization. And I, certainly encourage you to have those types of conversations around your business outcomes, audience goals, attendee goals. If you didn't have one of those when you set out to do this thing, create one now. This is the time to do it. When you're in that strategic planning phase, document this, share it, socialize it with your stakeholder groups. You're not going to be able to achieve alignment on what format is going to serve that need if you don't have a comprehensive strategy. And so only then is it really when we can start to align that format with the need or the purpose. And so I'll give you a couple of examples here. If the purpose of your event was, let's say, adoption of a product or of a particular function, and you host training events, then can attendees, these are the types of questions that you can ask yourself, can attendees learn in a virtual environment rather than an in-person one? If the training was given by, let's say, one speaker with limited interaction, or you didn't need a tactile approach, maybe there was no device that was necessary, the reliance on virtual might be an easy decision rather than trying to take that back to in-person. Or even offer it in a hybrid event experience. Virtual might be an easy approach. It might be an easy format for you. But if you need a more tactile, hands-on, immersive experience, you might be inclined to wait on that for an in-person experience or try to offer it in hybrid. So these are the types of conversations. What about networking and relationship building focused events? I think a lot of us host those. Maybe you saw that those were not quite as successful in the virtual event space, given much more limited engagement from the audience, which is definitely something we've noted as we've trialed things throughout 2020. That's something that maybe we hold on and wait for an in-person or a hybrid offering. You also might be an organization who is reliant on ticket revenue exclusively. These are the types of things we're starting to ask ourselves. Will it even be possible for us to recoup some of that budgeting dollars or that expected or anticipated revenue in a virtual context where charging for the event may be a little bit more difficult because attendees don't see as much value in that experience? And so that's going to set the tone for deciding what the event format needs to be, whether that ultimately transpires into a virtual, hybrid, or exclusively in-person event experience. And I'll give you one last example. So lead generation, pipeline acceleration for all you corporate planners and or marketers who are on the call. What does that mean for your engagement and your data capture strategy? You can start to dive even deeper with different audience segments. What we've been noting is that highly engaged audiences crave highly engaging experience. So your customers may be lower in the funnel type prospects. Those might be better suited for hybrid and or in-person event experiences, but maybe those contacts who are lesser known to your brand or they're your top of your funnel, they're prospecting with you. They might continue to benefit from a less hands-on, less tactile, less immersive experience that is best suited for the virtual environment. The really important thing to do here when you're having these conversations is really exploring what success looks like from all the angles, both the business and the attendee perspective. And that's going to drive the best decision-making process. And I will say, last point here is to remember to lean into the data and the lessons you learn from your 2020 programming, both the good and the bad. I think sometimes we shy away from looking at the lack of success we may have had something, but that is an indicator for a decision that we need to make about a program. And if that means that it needs to remain an in-person event moving into 2021, and we have to delay on that event experience, that's an okay decision to make. And it just needs to be socialized with our stakeholder group. So data is going to be your friend, as much as sometimes we think it might be an enemy in our decision-making or even trying to wrap our arms around it. Data is going to be your friend when you're starting these types of strategic conversations. So let's talk about the team that's going to help us execute on that strategy. And so there we go, transitioning now, just a little lag. All right, so our old mindset, what we had noted pre-pandemic, was that the planning and the marketing organizations, especially if there were different functions within your org, you had a distinct planning group and you had a distinct marketing group, they operated fairly independent from one another. Planners historically were in charge of the things that you see on the screen. They had a lot of emphasis on budgeting, on sourcing, on the logistics. They got involved in the programming and the content, especially on the execution front, the attendee experience, and a lot of the vendor management. Marketers have historically been much more concerned with things that you're seeing on the screen. And this is, I somewhere sit in the middle uniquely in our own organization as an event marketer, weighing out the audience, the insights, the promotion, the interactions, and the follow-up, but also sitting uniquely in our meetings and events organization, having understanding of what planners are going through as well. But as we shifted into this past year, we're starting to note, especially seeing that event types are starting to converge. Virtual events are looking very similar to the programs marketers have been doing for years, namely in the form of webinars. The teams that go alongside executing these have been forced to work closer than ever before. Marketers are leveraging the planner's ability for that engaging event design, trying to maximize just the attendees, what the attendees getting out of it. They're always coming at it from the attendee perspective, and the marketer's knowledge of all of that digital engagement, lead management, data insights, and tracking and monitoring those experiences. That's kind of the traditional role that that marketers have had for years. And so as these event programs are starting to converge, so are these skill sets, and so are these individuals that are seated at the table. And the result should be a more effective total event program as digital events get even more engaging with the support of the planners, and in-person data and reporting evolves at a rapid rate for our in-person event programs. And so we start to see these shared objectives, shared KPIs, and shared ROI that's going to accelerate our program success holistically. I will pass it back over to Mike to kind of wrap us up here.
Great. So now I'll take you, thanks, Alyssa. I'm going to take you through the third one, right? So we talked about 3 areas of execution: strategy, team, and tech. And Alyssa has done a great job in taking us through the strategy and the team. And so I get everybody wants to talk about the tech, right? It's the boring tale of this dog, but critically important as we look to the landscape of 2021. So let me start by kind of backing up to 50,000 feet and just kind of asking a rhetorical question to the group assembled today. Is that, look, when you look at the critical systems that run your organization, right? Your AMS, your CRM, if you're on the corporate side, your marketing platforms, Marketo, Eloqua, right? Those kinds of things. Would you run different systems there just based on the tactic mix that you're seeing? And I think the answer is, of course not. Right? All these organizations tend to have one system that are running their critical programs, and they do that for really good reasons, right? They do that to get one holistic picture of the truth. This is my single source of truth. This is where it lives, and my systems feed into this. And as we look ahead at the growing, some might say the growing complexity of the event programs that are ahead of us in 2021 and beyond, the same is true for event technology in our view, and largely for the same reasons, right? Having that one system of truth allows you to everything from execute more efficiently from the planner side, train one set of people once to know how to use it, but it also allows you to standardize and normalize a lot of the data that's not only going to be captured and will transit through this system. So you can take the next best action. Your sales teams, your marketing teams, your membership teams can take that next best action. So we see the same fundamental truth happening when it comes to how you might want to look at your tech to support this event landscape for next year. Because absolutely, look, the planners on this call and our departments will invest in technology because it makes our job easier. It saves us time. It makes us more efficient. It allows us to do more with less. Those are absolutely valid reasons. I think you put an exclamation mark on those when we have to look at the job in front of us to execute across virtual and hybrid and in person next year. But I'd also want to just open our eyes that as planners and marketers work more closely together, a marketer is going to hire that tech for a slightly different job, right? So for the planners out there, understand that your marketers are going to be hiring event technology to listen for and capture those interest and buying signals that happen across all your events. And so that's where this one source of truth, this one system starts to deliver real value, not only for the planners that have simplicity of execution now and efficiency of execution, but we start to get that one system of truth for the data piece that the marketer is going to want to get out of these systems and use to translate into revenue or pipeline. Because for them, it also allows that universal program architecture, right? One system means one architecture, one templatized set of things I've got to care about, one templatized set of data that I need to manage or my downstream teams need to manage. And so there is simplicity in one. There is a lot of velocity and a lot of goodness in just maintaining that one single source of truth for that whole program. So that's the first thing that I wanted to just kind of mention as you look for your tech needs in 2021 and beyond. Look to find something that's a single source of truth. But that's going to get you a lot of the way there. But our view is that's not going to get you the entire way there, because capturing all of that event data, that rich data that sits in the quality and amount of engagement points that you have in your events, it's great to capture them. That's as I say, that's critical, but it's not sufficient. You're only part of the way there, because for almost all of us on this call today, in order to activate that data, you need to get that into the systems where your sellers or your marketers live. The folks downstream from you live every day. The reality is that they don't live in Cvent. The reality is that they live in the AMS, the CRM, or the marketing tech stack that runs your organizations. And so as we look at the role of those systems and how important it is to get the data there, this is what is going to take your offline events and make them integral, integrated parts of your digital marketing efforts, right? Because think about it, you're going to be able to get all the great demographic and firmographic data that comes through the registration systems, put that into these systems to append and build and make more rich those buyer profiles. But maybe even more importantly, you're going to be able to take all that great activity and engagement data that sits in our event programs, like what sessions did people register for? What did they attend? How did they rate that session? What booths did they visit, virtual or in person, right? And you start to be able to assemble a really deep, rich picture of what people are interested in. And as you can imagine, that's critical information for anybody downstream of you, that to Alyssa's earlier point, you had this event for a reason. You wanted to achieve a business outcome as a result of these interactions. This kind of rich picture can really help you accelerate those business outcomes. Just a quick story from us. We just recently concluded our Cvent Connect virtual event. That was in August, and we had over 43,000 registrations. We had about a 60, keep me honest, Alyssa, about a 60 to 63% attendee rate. And collectively, we were able to measure over 1 million engagement points of that audience over their 2 days with us. And those engagement points and that activity data makes us a lot smarter about what these people care about, what they don't care about, what topics we may want to follow up with them on, it builds trust between brand and buyer too, when you're able to personalize that outreach, personalize that post-event experience based on what you were able to learn from those folks as they transited for your event. And so then the last thing I'll leave you with, and then really look forward to your questions, is ultimately, right, once you've got the data and you've got it into your systems, you start to live what I kind of call the cross-channel dream. And this is ultimately where we believe most value will be unlocked in 2020 and beyond. Because the reality, as you're seeing on the screen right now, is your members, your buyers, your customers, they're going to be interacting with you in all kinds of channels next year and going forward, and in all kinds of ways. They're going to be on your website. They're going to be experimenting with your content. They're going to be at your virtual event. You may see them again at your in-person event. And each of those touch points, maybe I'm beating a dead horse at this point, but each of those touch points gives you a chance to see that person much more clearly. And that allows you to deliver value to them faster. It allows you to personalize that outreach to them. And then just to close, it will allow you to achieve your business outcome in a much more rapid, much more thoughtful, and much more holistic way. If you start treating all of these people as individuals, you're going to get the business outcome you prefer much faster. So that's the opportunity that we see in front of us in 2021. There's certainly a lot to think of and a lot to process. We're still all experimenting, but this is kind of how we see it shaping up for next year and beyond. And so with that, Haley, maybe I hand it back to you, because I think both Alyssa and I, look, we talk a lot about this internally at Cvent. Alyssa and I spend a lot of time talking with each other about this, but really want to hear what you all have to say and what your questions are.
Thank you, Mike. Yeah, everyone go ahead and send in your questions for our panelists. You can use that Q&A tab that's in your toolbar, and we will dive right into these questions. So just to begin, we had a question earlier, and just as a baseline, as we are heading into more of a technology event landscape, can you just define the difference between virtual and hybrid for our audience, just to give a little bit of a baseline?
I'll let you take that, Mike.
Sure. So we have a perspective on this at Cvent. I'll try to make a long story really short, because I know we don't have a lot of time. We do not believe virtual events are webinars. That's not our point of view in the market, right? A virtual event tends to be multi-session, multi-outcomes needed. Some of them tend to have trade show and exhibitor components. So we're starting to see the virtual event space depart from the webinar space, in that it is a much more immersive, interactive, fully branded experience that can be that can deliver more programmatic value through lots of different sessions, lots of different tracks. So maybe that's one way to start thinking about virtual and separating it from a classic webinar that we all might think of. I think it gets really interesting when we look at hybrid. Our view, this is just our view, is that sticking a camera in the back of a session room and streaming live that content to an online audience is not really a hybrid event. You have an online audience, yes. You have an in-person audience, yes. But I think as we look to what the future of hybrid events are or what they should be, it's how do you plan two experiences in the context of one event? Realizing the unique interactivity needs of your online audience and the unique interactivity and engagement needs of your in-person audience, and structuring everything from your invite list, your content strategy, your agenda, and the entire experience around meeting the needs of both of those audiences. So it is more involved, we believe, than just putting a camera in the back of a room and streaming live video out to a group of online people.
I'll just add a little keyword. I like buzzwords. I think that came across in this presentation, but integrated is the word that I feel is the most important to the hybrid and to the hybrid conversation. You have to integrate those audience experiences. Otherwise, you're just hosting a virtual event and an in-person event. So how does something become hybrid? It is immersive to both of those audiences, and it's integrated to both of those audiences. I've used the probably antiquated and very millennial type of an analogy, but American Idol is a perfect hybrid event experience. When it is broadcasted live, you have a virtual audience that is participating in the live component by voting. I think we're all used to that model now. Dancing with the Stars, which has been on for ages. So like that one will work too. But that voting interactivity creates the hybrid event experience. Otherwise, it's just a static broadcast. But doing that participatory activity, an integrated experience, is when something really becomes hybrid.
This is a great question. How can event planners become stronger marketers? What can they do to just become
attending webinars like this one?
Yes.
It's a perfect plug. Education, coming to events, doing webinars. There's so much quality free content right now out in the space. join it, consume it, ask marketer friends. If you have marketers in your organization, rub elbows with them. Don't give them a high five, but rub the elbow. Have them come to your conversations, ask them types of questions like what we were talking about. That strategy conversation, as much as it just kind of sounded like I was asking a lot of questions, that's what marketers do. We sit and we brainstorm and we ask questions and we poke and we prod and we analyze things from a lot of different angles in order to develop the go forward outcome, right? Planners are very tactical and execution focused. Planners just want to move the needle and get things done. Marketers are going to sit and analyze and debate and question, probably maybe ad nauseum. And so I think that having those types of conversations, even if it's with a marketer friend or chatting in a chat forum or coming to these types of conversations, you start to understand the dialogue and the taxonomy that marketers are used to. So you can have a more educated conversation when you start to facilitate the conversation. Anything to add to that, Mike?
Nailed it. I just for the audience, Alyssa is such a great resource on this. She sits at a unique intersection at Cvent, right between our marketing teams and our planning teams.
Right.
And so it's just a very refreshing perspective. We do think more organizations may go that way because of the increased need for planning and marketing to get together, especially on these digital channels.
So we've got a lot of questions coming in and I'm just navigating through them. But I think this question covers a couple of people have asked similar questions related to this. If you're conducting a hybrid event, what suggestions do you have to control costs yet deliver to experiences, especially in a season when budgets can be pretty tight given the pandemic?
We are fully aware of that. And I alluded to this on a separate webinar. I think you need to be very calculated with where you're going to invest your hybrid dollars. In my opinion, look for the scale in your program. Look at your largest event, look at your most complex and the most programming components where you might have the opportunity to expand to a very large network. Don't take a very niche, really small, very tiny, confined type thing where in-person and relationship building is the focus. That's probably not going to be the right fit to invest those dollars. Look where you can deliver scale because that's where we're seeing the success within the virtual space. So that's where you can exploit and prove the value of the investment of those dollars. That's my opinion. I know that we're going to be very budget conscious moving into 2021. And so that's not necessarily, the end all be all strategy, but that's certainly what Cvent's looking to do with its hybrid strategy.
And definitely look for those points. Alyssa, I think she nailed it. Let those points of scale, right? Infrastructure. Look for infrastructure that scales. Look for systems that scale. Look where the content experience can scale and where it needs to diverge, right? But looking for those areas of common threads that can work across both. So you don't have multiple systems, multiple vendors, multiple expense sides of this thing. But look, our expectations of online value for attendees have risen as a result of our 2020 experience. And so we are all going to learn, what great hybrid event execution looks like in 2021. If 2020 was the year of experimenting and getting our arms around virtual, 2021 is going to be the same thing for hybrid.
Mm-hmm.
So while we're talking about hybrid, we'll stay here for a minute. We've got a couple questions related to it. So one person asked, how do you avoid cannibalizing your in-person registration with a hybrid event? I know it's kind of a fine line if you're really wanting to get people there.
So I have a story to tell, Alyssa, if I can.
Please.
True company, I won't name the company because the company was in my background. And I thought they threaded this needle extremely well. It is one approach. There will be many, and we'll experiment as an industry with lots of approaches. But they had the same issue. They had a paid in-person event, but they wanted to play with this hybrid thing, but they didn't want to cannibalize the revenue that was going to be. They didn't want to cannibalize the revenue from their in-person event. So what this organization did is they started marketing the in-person event about 8 months out. And they ran that, and that's what they ran. They marketed their in-person event until about 3 weeks before the event. And then 3 weeks before the event, when it becomes tough to get low airfares. It becomes tough to rearrange your life and your schedule to all of a sudden go to Vegas for 4 days, right? They saw the window of in-person registration starting to shrink. And that's when they opened up the aperture on their online marketing. And so those last 3 weeks were really devoted to, we think we've captured 90 to 95% of our in-person audience. These last 2 to 3 weeks, we're going to open the aperture on our online marketing, and we're going to drive our online registrations with this last 2 to 3 weeks. And so that's how they approached it. One of many ideas I think we'll all learn as we go through next year.
Now,
I have so many different thoughts on this too, because there's so and to Mike's point, what he's delivered is, I think what we've seen as like kind of like a traditional model is try to drive in person first. That's the in-person priority, right? Post-pandemic, and given the travel restrictions and things that are still going on, I struggle to, this is my personal strategic mind at play, and the devil and the angel on the shoulder is, does that limit our virtual audience? And does that not embrace them as we should? Does it make them feel like they are, it's exclusionary as opposed to inclusionary? And so do we need to start acknowledging the virtual audience up front? Does this event need to be out the gate if we're marketing, let's say 6 months out from an event experience? Do we need to acknowledge that this event will be offered in hybrid, and do our tickets need to, ticket admission items, whatever you call them, conference passes? Do we need to acknowledge all those options for an inclusive experience and acknowledge all of those limitations and the diversity of our audience, given the health and the safety concerns that we have right now? Probably so. But that's something that we're going to probably see a lot being tinkered with moving into 2021, is this new launch strategy of virtual conference passes, virtual conference pricing models. 2020 was all about, I don't want to say all about free, but a lot of things were free. And I think maybe we're going to start to dial the needle a little bit more on virtual might have a cost associated to it. So I don't know if I have the answers. I'm just giving you all the thoughts that have run through my head right now. And they're certainly part of the strategic conversations we're having as we look to hybridize our 2021 Cvent Connect event. But we'll see how these things start to materialize. Sorry, didn't want to belabor that one.
So I know that it's a fluid situation, and a lot of people are learning on as they go when it comes to virtual and hybrid events. But are there any established best practices out there that you would recommend, or anything published that people can access?
Yeah, so that's such a great question, because it gets right to the core of the benchmark, right? It gets right to the core. What are others doing, and where are others seeing success? And we can look, our systems show that, anywhere from 6 to 10x registration lift over in person. We're seeing anywhere from 40% to 63% attendees. We're seeing more shorter session times, like we're seeing more 30-minute sessions than perhaps hour-long sessions, just as people experiment with the session length. So we're seeing a lot of that. Yeah, I mean, we do have several resources on the Cvent website. We have a couple different virtual assets that are all around a practitioner's guide to virtual events, which takes you through what we see as some best practices and some things to think about on the content side, on the community side, how you think through the data problems. So with apologies for the shameless plug for the Cvent website, there are some great virtual assets. The practitioner's guide is my favorite.
So I'm gonna go back and change gears a little bit, because we've been talking about hybrid events.
It's great, by the way, it's great to hear a month ago we weren't getting those questions. A month ago we were getting a lot of questions about hybrid, but we are starting to see in our sourcing data the dimmer switch going up for in-person events. We're seeing that in our sourcing data. The vaccine news is great, so it's great to hear the hybrid conversation starting to get louder. It's great.
Right. So this is a good question, and one that we all encounter. When it comes to technology, we all are operating at home with the different kinds of technologies. And so can you talk about how you consider digital accessibility in hybrid events?
Ooh,
Yeah.
that one's a doozy. I will say something that we've probably wrongfully been touting is accessibility in this space of having virtual. There are less travel limitations, there are less budgeting concerns. And so I think when we came out the gate, there was a lot of conversation about the accessibility of events now, broadening to a wider audience. I did have a slap on the wrist about talking about the inaccessibility for those that have tech limitations. And I don't know if we have an answer to that yet. I genuinely don't know if we have an answer to that yet. I do think that there's a privilege to have Wi-Fi in our homes. There's a privilege to having all of this great technology, webinar, lighting cams, all this stuff that we have. And I don't know if the industry at large has responded to those that are not able to access from a technology standpoint, that do prefer to walk down the street and gather in a face-to-face environment. And that is something, I think that's why hybrid events are going to be the future of events. I think that's why the tarot card read hybrid events in the future, is that we need to be inclusive and open to all of the diversity of our audiences, no matter where they're situated. I don't know if you have anything to add to that, Mike, but it definitely is something that has come across my table, and we are aware of that there are limitations in virtual too, just as there are in an in-person event.
Exactly. And no, I don't know that the industry has a good answer holistically for that, other than this, what I kind of come back to is this true north of the more options we can give our audiences to interact with us, the better off we'll be. And to the extent that we might have come through 2020 and 2021 and virtual and hybrid, these things start to the extent that we now deliver more events or more engagement touch points, more ways to access a brand and that information and that content and those networking opportunities, that's for the better.
And I just shout out to Susan, who's on the chat right now, bringing up working with technology providers, but also proving that it's a point to make sure that closed captioning is a priority, yes, acknowledging color blindness. I know we had a very diverse audience for our Cvent Connect Europe audience that had to have language management. And so just acknowledging the point of our events is to be open and inviting and warm and allowing for as many different audience members to participate. So just like with an in-person event, a virtual event needs to explore all those angles as well, and making sure that we are inclusive.
So I know we're getting close on our time. We have a lot of questions that come in, but just for the audience, if we haven't gotten to your question, the speakers are going to get these questions after the session. So we may be able to answer after the session as well. So
thank you all for all these questions. It's great. Love it. Thank you.
Agreed.
Let me try and squeeze in at least one last question. And since we're talking about marketing, the marketing side of this too. So one person asked, do you have any advice on how we can get more leads and build brand awareness? I know that's got to be difficult when you're not used to the virtual or hybrid landscape and you're used to like the in-person experience. So what advice do you have on building leads?
So a couple things. Virtual, I really believe this. Virtual is, if you're chasing a lead volume goal, virtual is going to be your best friend. It is broad reach, it's low cost. It does tend to be lower engagement overall than its hybrid or in-person counterpart. So what my suggestion would be is to go broad with your audience, work closely with your marketing department on what the definition of a lead will be as a result of their engagement in a virtual event. Just their registration and their attendance and a couple pieces of activity actually in the event itself. So get really tight with your marketing department on the definition of a lead. And then get ready to prioritize, because what we are seeing is virtual gives you the possibility for massively scaled up lead flow. And so get that definition tight, agree with your sales, marketing, and planning departments on what a lead will be, and then get ready to prioritize those things downstream because you're going to get a lot.
Totally agree with everything Mike just said.
Can I squeeze in one last question?
Do it.
I just think we have so many planners. I just think this is a great question to ask. So what interactive aspects of virtual events have you seen done in the past that has been successful? Any ideas that they can steal?
Love live Q&A. Love live camera. I mean, this is just the dynamics being live, being able to address the audience, being able to respond to people like Susan. I think those types of interactivity, even if it's not completely two-way, at least we're addressing the live audience, is fantastic. We have seen polling. We love chat just so that intra-attendee networking is available. Being able to pre-schedule appointments, that's something that Cvent provides, but there's certainly a lot of technologies that offer things like that. The more that you can drive the live engagement, though, the more engaged somebody is going to be. We have noted, and I think all of us have pivoted very sharply from pre-recordings where the audience doesn't feel as warm and fuzzy and touchy. I think that this is our best attempt at creating that face-to-face interactivity while we have these types of restrictions in a virtual environment.
Well, Mike and Alyssa, I know we are over our time, and thank you for joining us today. Thank you everyone for coming out and watching. It's been such an insightful presentation, and we just thank you so much for joining us today. As a reminder,
thanks.
And just as a reminder to the audience, a couple of you have asked, there will be a recording that will be available to view on demand, and it will be emailed to you shortly. So stay tuned for that. All right.
Thanks again,
well, thank you, everyone. I
Thanks.
hope everyone has a great day. Bye,
Bye.
guys.